Part 1 of A Squire's Trial by Alexander Slavros and Charles Chappell. An Iron March publication, 2015, version 1.2. Original pencil drawing for cover by Jose Antonio Garcia Moreno. To the reader of this book we pose the question, would you truly consider him mad, one who'd want to revive chivalry? Chivalry, a community of those who show up everywhere a conflict erupts in order to spread the terror that their weapons evoke in defense of honor and justice. Pope Urban II. Ahoy there! I turned around at the strange greeting, and saw a man briskly walk toward me off the highway road and down the path to the storage house. It wasn't rare that we got visitors all the way out here. Customers from the city would often come by to check in on their goods, or deal with the boss when his job demanded he stay here. But they all arrived by personal vehicles, whereas this stranger that approached me was traveling by foot. Moreover, he wasn't approaching from the direction of the city. Exactly how long has he been walking? As he grew closer, I realized that he may have traveled quite the distance. He was clad in black, military-looking clothing, dust and dirt from the road covering his boots, and pants up to his knees, a severely scraped and scratched knee guard on the right leg, a sizable backpack, a jacket with rolled-up sleeves, a loosely tied scarf on his neck, and everything had pockets full of something. The more he approached, the more the little details began to spring up, like some custom patches over his clothes, marks on his knuckles, and some scars. What was the most striking element of this peculiar traveler, however, was his face. Sharp features, blonde hair, combed back with a scruffy beard. Certainly not a native to our country, as this was not a common appearance here. He had the face of someone weathered or hardened by experience, and yet his eyes, the man was most likely well into his 40s, but in his eyes was the mirth of youth. Overall, he gave an impression of someone with stories to tell. "Could you please tell me if that's the capital there?" he asked me, pointing towards the city on the horizon. Rather curious how he didn't know this. Nevertheless, I told him that it was. "Ah, grand. You don't suppose you could share some water with me? My camelback is almost empty." "Camelback?" I inquired, never having heard of such a thing. He explained to me that his backpack had a reservoir for water, and a tube through which he could drink it straight out of the backpack. I've certainly seen tourists and backpackers before, but none like this man, and certainly not with such equipment. Though he insisted it wasn't so uncommon, I pointed him to our well, and this time around I got to surprise him, as it wasn't often that he was offered water from a well. He was used to everyone only ever having bottled water. As he was filling up his camelback, I asked if he wanted to ride to the city. My shift was already over, and I needed to run some errands in the capital myself. He declined, saying, "I walked this far on foot, I may as well finish on foot." This again piqued my curiosity, and I had to prod further. "Exactly where from have you been walking to the capital?" His reply brought more questions than answers as he tried to describe, in some uncertain terms, what I barely managed to piece together as being the port city that was some 350 or more kilometers away. Surely he doesn't mean that he walked the entire way. That would take days. But to my amazement, he insisted that he had, indeed, walked the whole way here, which baffled me completely. Who in this day and age would bother walking so far, and moreover allow himself to lose so much time? Maybe if I knew why he was traveling to the capital, I could figure out some answers. "So why exactly are you going to the city?" "I'm heading to hook up with the toreros for a while." At first I didn't quite realize what he meant, until I looked him over once again and it clicked. He meant the notorious, self-proclaimed fascist gang that gained infamy for practically wiping out the entire anti-fascist movement in a series of attacks that the media described as provoking demonstrators into confrontation and leading them to violent ambushes. "You're a fascist?" "Indeed I am." This certainly explained the black military clothes, but it was still a bit hard to take in. The man definitely fit the blonde hair and blue eyes German Nazi myth that is so prized by fascists. In fact, with his face, one could imagine that he had stepped straight out of a Third Reich propaganda poster, yet his calm and friendly demeanor, as well as that odd, youthful fire behind his eyes, was nothing like what I'd expect from a fascist. He had a charm about him that was completely disarming, and this was only furthering my confusion. He had obviously noted this, and his expression changed to a very subtle and hard-to-pinpoint almost smile or smirk, which wasn't demeaning, but rather one that conveyed his understanding of why I was at a loss. This only annoyed me, and I spoke out again. "So what, you're going to join those torero hoodlums and attack innocent people?" "Well, I suppose we have a different view of what constitutes an innocent person." "Why?" Why are you even trying to get in contact with them? You're obviously not a local. They'll treat you just like they would any other foreigner. Oh, they know I'm coming. They invited me. Nationalists friendly with foreign nationalists? Shouldn't they all hate each other in defense of their own or something like that? How did you even come to this country? I traveled by sea with a band of fascist pirates. Fascist pirates? This was getting absurd. He went on to explain to me that there were fascists calling themselves the Poets, who traveled in a couple of small ships and apparently raided anyone they wanted, somehow managing to avoid capture or even much coverage by the media. He had traveled across the continent to the shores of their native land, and they took him aboard. They made their way to the port city from which he traveled here. During his time with them, he partook in their activities, raided some rich yachts, covertly stole goods from commercial ships, and sunk makeshift boats and rafts that immigrants from another continent used to cross the sea. He shared more of his travels with me, which were a very weird mix of expected fascist savagery, inspiring adventures, and stories of truly good deeds. It was also the way he told his tales, although in some cases he described atrocious things like sinking sand niggers. He told of these things like he was sharing a particularly humorous anecdote that demanded some theatrical flair on his part to make truly come alive. Never before had I felt so unsettled, and yet truly engaged and interested. Had someone observed this from the side, they would have mistaken our exchange for nothing more than a lifelong friend sharing some good-humored stories with someone from whom he hadn't seen in years. For me, the whole thing was a wild roller coaster that somehow combined exciting, thrilling banter of a worldly traveler with the unsettling comprehension of the horrid actions this man had taken, and with not a single shred of remorse. It was almost like he was from another planet and our customs were too different to really reconcile, even though we both experienced joy, fun, and excitement the same way. This man was like no other that I have met, or even heard of before. Sure, we all know of pirates and adventurers. The movies are oversaturated with such characters, but I never imagined that such people could ever be real. There are, of course, historical pirates and travelers, but these things are of a distant past. So this man appeared as something from the history books, or straight out of a movie. And yet he was also a fascist. His visit was an unexpected intrusion into my day, or rather, my life, as I had never encountered anything even remotely like this, possibly making this a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Like a bright flash of light in an otherwise monotonous and dull by comparison existence, I was sure I'd never meet a man like him again. I felt a burning desire to know more about him, to figure out what had made him tick. I don't get it. Hearing you, it feels like you can do anything you want. Why walk around like a vagabond and hang out with bums, calling yourself a fascist? I bet a man of your ability could lead a successful life. A successful life, you say? Yes, perhaps. I could be a lawyer, or an executive, or even a politician. Ha! He let out a hearty laugh, more of a bark, really. I didn't quite understand such an attitude. I myself have always been a rather simple man and didn't aspire for too much. Just enough to get by and lead an all-right life. But who would be so dismissive of success and prestige in society, especially when it's right within their grasp, as it seems to be with this man? I wouldn't deny a raise or a promotion, so I must admit that his laughter stung me a little. Here he was, laughing at what others, and maybe myself at one point, aspired to, as if mocking anyone ever even trying to follow this path that is so common. Instead, he purposely chose to be something that is universally rejected, an idea that could never triumph in this world. What's funny? Why cling to fascism of all things? Isn't just some failed ideology from the past? What relevance does that have today? Fascism isn't from the past, my friend. It is eternal. Fascism predates humanity. Failed, you say? Does nature ever fail? No, though we might fail her, and that would be the end of us. You're exaggerating, man, talking about this as if it were the one true religion. When I was in college, everyone was preaching their own ideology, and they were all sure that truth was on their side. Fascism is just the same, an ideology like any other. Ha! I've heard that before. Let me ask you, can there be more than one truth? Well, everyone's got their own opinion of what the truth is, and no, I'm not talking about opinions. I'm talking about truth. Could two contradictory opinions be true at the same time? I guess not, if you say it like that. Good. And what, would you say, is the opposite of truth? Falsehood, lies, illusion? On any given topic, can there be more than one falsehood, more than one lie? There could be any number of falsehoods. You could make up anything you want, really. And all those lies, or as you said, all those made-up ideas, they could be quite different from each other, couldn't they? But what do all of these false notions have in common? I don't know. Let me think. I guess none of them line up with reality. Indeed, but that's a given, since if they did, they would be truths. but they have something else in common, something more basic. Let me help you. When a liar tells you a falsehood, what is he trying to achieve? He's trying to deceive me, to convince me that what he is saying is true. Exactly. Does he warn you that he's lying? No, of course not. Then it wouldn't be a falsehood, would it? Oh, I see. All lies are the same, in that they pretend to be true. I see you understand now. Well done. So would you agree that in this world, while there's one truth, countless lies are scrambling to usurp it and pretend to be the real deal? Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? What makes you so sure that fascism is the only truth, that all the other ideologies are falsehoods? You misunderstand. I've never claimed that fascism was some fixed doctrine and that it embodied the whole truth. You have it backwards. It's the other way around. What? I don't understand. I'm a follower of truth, first and foremost. Truth is my religion. Truth is my guide, my master. And truth doesn't come from any man-made ideology. If it's an idea that someone dreamed up, then it's definitely a falsehood. Truth comes from nature herself, from the universe. It just is. That all sounds very interesting, but what does it have to do with fascism? My friend, that is fascism. I was unsettled at this answer, which I didn't expect. I stayed dumbfounded for a few moments, not knowing what to think. Am I missing something here? Isn't fascism just some racist, nationalist ideology that led to World War II? Why is this guy convinced there's some mystical truth to it? I see my answer confuses you. He once again gave me that subtle smile and looked to the sky. I guess there's too much of a disconnect between your preconceived notions about fascism and what I'm conveying to you. I know. Let me tell you a little story before we go on. A story? Another one of your adventures? Not this time. This one's a classic. A certain father had 3 sons, who were always quarreling. Hearing their constant disputes angered him, but no matter how he scolded them, they wouldn't see reason. Getting worried about their future, he decides to give them a practical lesson. He tells his sons to bring him a bundle of sticks to him. Tying the sticks together, he asks them to break this bundle. Each of them tries and fails. The father removes the knot, distributes the sticks to his sons. The boys now break them with ease. You see, my sons, when you're apart, you can be destroyed easily. But if you stick to each other, you become unbreakable. It's a nice story. Indeed, this story is thousands of years old. It inspired one of the great symbols of Western civilization, the bundle of sticks. I've never heard of it. It's also called the fasces. It was used by the Romans in their ceremonies and can still be found sculpted in the stone of state buildings in many countries today. The fasces is a symbol of unity. This is where the modern term fascism comes from. It has roots going back to the remotest antiquity. I think I see where you're going with this. You claim that fascism has existed since antiquity, passed down from Roman times? No, that's not quite what I'm saying. Truth doesn't need to be passed down. Truth simply is. What gets passed down is knowledge and opinions about this or that. I don't see the difference. After all, if 2 people have conflicting knowledge about something, isn't it just like a difference in opinion? Truth is truth, regardless of what anyone says. So, opinions are a result of ignorance, while knowledge comes from nature, from experience. No one has opinionated arguments about gravity. I'm not sure. Can't different people have different opinions about the same experience? When was the last time you heard someone tell you that you should listen to these other guys who say that gravity is caused by your shadow gripping you and dragging you back down to Earth? After all opinions are equally valid, aren't they? His witty example made me laugh, but at the same time, I saw where he was coming from. You don't really see arguments of opinion in hard sciences and established facts. I don't imagine anyone would argue that 2 + 2 equals 4 with just an opinion, especially since we can literally prove it using our fingers. All these arguments of ideals and opinions that I've listened to in college or seen on television never concerned factual information or say, pit a dentist against someone who pulls out their teeth with a bit of string and a door on matters of dental hygiene. He must have taken my laughter and short moment of musings as confirmation that I agreed with his point, and he carried on. Here's another universal element of falsehoods. They are all made up by people, which is again why there are so many of them. A lie can be either a conscious creation to deceive, or a result of delusion or misinterpretation. While truth, on the other hand, is like fact, such as gravity, in your example, and it always remains the same, regardless of what anyone says or thinks. Precisely. This is indeed why any and all opinions are a result of ignorance. If you knew the truth, you wouldn't have an opinion, you'd have knowledge. I'm sure you'll appreciate, however, the irony that in this way all opinions truly are equal, in the sense that they are all equally wrong. They are all always false. But people are hardly to blame. Trying to explain how nature works out of ignorance is what people do. If we don't know the answer, we strive to discover it. True, but we must be aware that the path towards truth is beset with falsehoods, and the further down that path we travel, the more dangerous it becomes, as we may start to obsess over things that become abstract or entirely material. This is why I, and others like me, look down on philosophy. I was almost taken aback once more, but now that I knew where he was coming from, I could see where he was going next as well, and so let him continue without interruption. Philosophy is like a factory for opinions of the worst kind. One of my pirate friends expressed his distaste for it in a witty manner. I think he described it along these lines. Quote, "Oh, let me dabble with some abstract thought disconnected from reality, content with its own little narrative bubble on human life, and, oh dear God, why isn't it working? It was so perfect on paper. Where has it all gone so wrong? People must have done it wrong, of course. If only everyone were like me." So what he meant is that philosophy isn't based in reality? Precisely. Philosophers and their children, ideologues, are all so concerned with their limited models of the world that they miss how far they've trailed away from reality. Even a child can observe the world around itself without guidance and gain better knowledge of it than philosophers with their abstract formulas. I suppose so, though I'm no good at philosophy, so I can't really be the judge here. Well, let me give you one example straight out of antique philosophy. There was a Greek man, Zeno, and he wanted to show other philosophers the absurdity of their abstract thinking, so he put to them several paradoxes that showed a conflict between their reasoning and reality. One of them was that of the mythological hero Achilles and a simple tortoise. He told them simply that Achilles would never catch the tortoise, because by the time Achilles catches up to where the tortoise would have already made its way to a new point, and by the time Achilles got to that point, the tortoise would have already been elsewhere again, and thus Achilles will never catch the tortoise. It certainly does sound reasonable, but we both know that it just isn't true. Yeah, I get it now. Seems rather obvious, though, that a man can catch up to a tortoise. But in the abstract world detached from reality, you can come up with many such seemingly sensible formulas. Right. I see now what you mean in general. All lies are from people, but truth comes from nature. Well, we could indeed leave it at that, but nature is also a manifestation of truth, rather than its source. So you mean truth comes from some higher power that created everything, like God? Something along those lines. This was certainly an interesting conversation, as I'd never heard these arguments before, even in college. However, once again I had to remind myself that this man is a self-proclaimed fascist, and that none of this was really related to what I know of fascism and Nazism. The Toreros weren't some lofty discussions club. They were violent thugs, and apparently he and they are in the same boat. He even mentioned that the other fascists he was with were pirates who left immigrants stranded in the sea. What of the racism, the warmongering, the atrocities and violence, the totalitarianism, all that anyone I've ever known associated with fascism? How does any of this truth and lies philosophy connect with something so vile? But wait, we've gone very far off track. I'm still no closer to understanding why you're a fascist, and it feels like all of this has little or nothing to do with fascism. And I had tried to tell you what fascism is without all that we have discussed up to this point. You wouldn't have understood me. I had told you that truth is my master. I do not wish to comply with man-made ideas. Instead, I stand as someone who champions truth. That is what fascism is all about. One great man once said, quote, "You either believe in the truth and apply it to yourself without egotism, otherwise you don't believe in it and you're kidding yourself." End quote. This is precisely what makes fascism different from everything else. It seeks to apply truth to human life, regardless of what that means for any individual or group. No egotism, no shallow interests, no entitlement. Everything else, all the ideologies and systems, are nothing more than the products of men lying to themselves for the sake of those petty interests. Invert my colors. Eyes are getting pretty sore here. Sure, but how could that justify the terrible things that fascists are doing? How can you use the supposed truth to make it okay to let people drown like your pirate friends are doing, or to set some race above another? If truth means living in some hellish world, then I'd rather have justice. Justice, you say. Well, what is justice to you? Isn't it obvious? Justice means not hurting other people, keeping the peace, making sure people who do bad things get punished. What do you mean by hurting other people? Do you only mean killing or injuring? What about emotional distress, insults, making fun of people? What about making people unhappy, unsatisfied with their lot? What about exploiting them? I don't know. I haven't thought about it. The fact is that our whole existence is filled with suffering, with pain. No matter what we do, we can't change that fact. No matter what laws we make or what social order we adopt, the only thing we can change is who suffers and in what way. Justice can't be about preventing suffering. Then what? Just kill everyone you don't like? Let the world burn? No. But think about this. Would you describe the world of animals and nature in general as being unjust? It's just nature, the way things are. Is it unfair that the lion eats the gazelle, yet the gazelle never gets to eat the lion? Ha! No, it's just their nature. But you're using a false analogy. All humans are equal. We're not differing species of animals, so we should all be treated equally. If one person is always ahead of others, it's unfair. You can't justify that with nature. Is that so? Would you say that all humans are the same height? Of course not. Do they all have the same strength? No, there's big variations in strength. Have you ever met anyone who was clearly more stupid than you? Yeah, but I've also met people who were smarter, too. How can someone who's bigger, stronger, and more intelligent be perfectly equal to someone who's smaller, weaker, and dumber? It just seems like they should be equal. If two people apply for a job, what does justice call for? Should the more competent and experienced person get the job, or the lesser one? I think it would be unfair to give the job to the lesser man. So justice calls for inequality, not quality, equality. Because the truth of the human condition is that we're not equal at all. Well, I can't really argue with that, though it seems wrong somehow. It seems like it's really unfair to people who are less gifted by nature. They keep being told to succeed, yet they can't perform, failing at everything they do. Yes, there's the problem. If people accepted the reality of their nature, and if society was organized in such a way that each person was carefully placed where they belong, then such unfairness wouldn't be a problem, would it? It seems like it would be an improvement, at least. Let me posit this to you. The point of justice is to restore truth within society, which is to say it seeks the implementation of the natural order in human affairs. In this sense, rectifying a wrongdoing is a form of correcting a lie and replacing it with truth. And according to you, justice and thus truth call for inequality. Indeed, the whole world today as we know it is built on the premise that people are equal. Another prevailing thought is that the ruling elites never like equality, because it's in their interest to stay on top, as I'm sure you've heard from certain people. You're referring to the... Exactly. But note the irony, that in the prevailing spirit of all opinions being equally valid, the powers that be never allow people to consider the other premise. Tell me, can you identify in whose interests it is equality? Those who are on the bottom? Precisely. But allow me to take this one step further. The inferior. Even though I was keeping up with his argument and I knew his position better, hearing him say inferior had once again perturbed my mind. I immediately thought back to the Nazi doctrine of exterminating those they believed to be inferior. I must have made an unappealing face, then that marked my distaste for the word. Don't look so Don't look so upset. People place too much emotional baggage on these terms of superior and inferior. They are surely of qualitative nature, but they do not presume any kind of attitude, or that the inferior are bad. It is simply that they are less than certain others. In relative comparison, you will get people superior to some and inferior to others. I do not hate those who are inferior to me. It's hard to disassociate that word from these implications. Very true, and even people like me sometimes forget that, though not without good reason, as they are filled with fury at the injustices that exist today. And so I come back to you with our topic. When you consider equality to be an interest, it gains a no less sinister appearance as one you normally get from the idea of those superior having an interest in maintaining their power. From the fascist point of view, all interests are wrong, be it the interest of someone coveting a position of power, which he may very well not deserve, or the interest of those who are unhappy with their lot to gain leverage or status that they do not deserve. So what you claim is that equality is not, as everyone believes today, an essential truth, so much as it is an interest. Correct. Although our opponents could of course claim the same of us, but our principal position is to, once again, accept the truth, no matter what it is or what it means for us. Thus, one of the most essential divides between fascism and virtually everyone else is that we hold inequality to be an expression of truth, and justice calls for inequality. This is the dichotomy that matters to us, not some abstract intellectual classification like right or left, but superior and inferior. Well, there is certainly something inspiring, I suppose, in how you want to follow what you believe to be the truth, regardless of what they mean for you personally. I am glad that you think so, but it is not entirely something that you are not familiar with. Acts of selfless heroism and sacrifice also contain that noble element that pushes one to dispense with their own well-being for what is right. And if there is anything at all that you will take away from our encounter this day, let it be this. If someone is selling you something that was dreamt up in the vacuum of abstract thought or built on a solely material premise, then it is already a lie and most likely involves the interests of the person trying to sell you that lie, because he is unhappy with his lot in life and will want you to believe his lie to get what he wants, regardless of whether he, in fact, deserves it or not. And such people are abound in today's world as a result of the equality myth. They feel entitled, and everyone assumes they can be anything they want, no matter how ill-equipped they are to be that thing. Most people can't get what they want because they don't even put the work in to get it. This also rang true as I thought back to my own co-workers, some of whom I believed they deserved to get a promotion or even entertained fantasies of becoming celebrities, or big shots when they were barely competent to organize a picnic. And of course they had their excuses. Well, yeah, but I probably could if I tried harder. I thought of some of the foreign talk shows that I watched and could recall similar complaining. I'd be rich if it weren't for those Democrats and their liberal agenda. So I expressed my thoughts to him. Everything is up to ourselves, really. I can understand that. But are you saying that those who fail in their attempts fail because they are inferior? Not exactly. I was actually saying that maybe if someone fails at something, it is because it is just not their lot to begin with, and they are lying to themselves. Obviously, this is not the case 100% of the time, but the old formula is true. Might makes right. The greatest people came into their own because they overcame obstacles no matter what, because they were superior. They had the might to do these things, an inherent quality that made them capable. Compare that to the people who get all the support, boosts, and hands up in the world, yet still fail, because it is simply not their lot to aspire to great things. I do see what you are saying, but I don't think it can really be so cut and dry. Allow me then to illustrate this point as well. It should reveal to you the actual nature of inferiority, and why inferior people are as they are. Consider fat people. Do you think the human body is supposed to be fat? Well, certainly not supposed to be, but it can grow fat. Indeed it can, which means the human body can change in certain ways up to a certain point. It has its limitations. Consider the human body on its own, devoid of personality, just a biological structure. A tool through which you interact with the world. In this sense, the human body is universally the same for all people. What is true of the human body is true for any person's body, barring some deformities and hereditary diseases. The only particular variations that exist in the body are of small consequence, such as height, for example. Any body can be fit, but not anyone can be fit. How do you mean? Well, if you've ever heard of the excuses of some fat people, I'm sure you're familiar with their claim that they are just born that way, that they are supposed to be fat because their bodies are fat. No, the real issue is that they are fat, not because of their bodies, but because of what makes up their personality and their character, which is weak and gives in to temptations and pleasure. They are not fat because their bodies are supposed to be fat. They are fat because they are weak in spirit, and it is that spirit that determines their physical appearance. Once again, an ironic situation. They truly are born that way, which is to say that they are born weak, and in that lies their inferiority. Thus, they are not weak because they are fat because they are weak and cannot change their innate nature, while the potential for their body to change is always there. I don't really believe that. I've heard of instances where when fat people lost their weight without surgery, mind you. If these people had done it by their own will, then it means they always were of strong character but fell into depravity. Their victory over their temptations that led them to being fat in the first place should indeed be celebrated. But it is pointless to try and tell those of weak character that they can lose weight, and the promise that anyone can get fit is but another myth of equality. Not everyone is strong enough to be in charge of their own body and reject its urges and desires. Moreover, if the choice was out of their hands, say, if they were bound to forced labor, slavery, or forced exercising, they would get into shape. That is, until you let them off the leash once more. Because in such forced conditions, it would no longer be a matter of their will, but rather of someone else's will being imposed on them, right? Absolutely. Very well. I suppose I would have to consider your argument for inferiority. Then please consider the following as well. Inferior people always turn to falsehoods because they are discontent with what their reality is, and refuse to accept it, driving them to act out against reality by in the only way possible, delusions and lies. And what of the superior people then? The superior people are so by nature. All they need to do is be themselves, and in doing so, they are standing closer to the truth. Just how nature simply is, so they must simply be. I'm not sure what you mean by this. Sounds like superior people have it easy, too. I suppose it may look that way to some, but in ancient times, certain societies built themselves on a structure that reflected the superiority-inferiority dichotomy, and one of their principal rules was that everyone must be true to their nature. So when an inferior person tried to reach beyond his station, he was shunned. Not just by the superior, but also by his equals and the inferior. They became pariahs. However, if a superior person attempted to engage in the duties or actions of the inferior, he was all the same shunned, not just by his equals and the superior, but also by the inferior. They too became pariahs. So there are certain limitations for the superior as well then? Yes, and again, mind you, that we are talking about innate human nature and not merely social structure. You can regard the world around us today as literally a revolt of the inferior, and they rule today from the top of the social structure, yet they still are not content and complain about inequality, be it between the races, sexes, or anyone else. Inferiors gaining power did not actually change their innate nature. It did not change the truth. The inferior are still inferior, despite being given benefits and positions they shouldn't even have in the first place. Very accurately put, my friend. I see you're becoming more adept yourself at this reasoning. He was right. Besides, I was no fool by any means, and he spoke convincingly. At this point, I was certain that prodding him again about things like racism and totalitarianism will not lead me to a direct answer. But if I wait and follow his reasoning, he will eventually reveal all the pieces of the puzzle for me to solve. It was rather engaging, and certainly nothing like what I had heard about fascism, or, frankly, anything of what we talked about. Sure, the topics were all well and familiar now, from the news and my own daily life and encounters, but he now presented them all to me in a completely different light. However, I was no longer sure how I felt about anything anymore, so I was resolved to hear him through to the end, and so prodded him to continue. And we'll stop there for now.